The decline and fall of Pitchfork magazine. So this is a bit of a niche subject, but as somebody that has been steeped in music journalism for the last 40 years, it's quite a big deal because they're offering a subscription model. And when I say offering, they're blocking access to read their reviews unless you pay $5 a month. So I grew up in an era when a lot was happening musically, but there was the best era for music journalism. There was Melody Maker, the New Musical Express, Sounds. On the other side of the hill were Rolling Stone and Q Magazine, these old white men trying to review music. But these were like really polemic. They would trash stuff so badly. They were very partisan. It was great to read. It was fantastic. A great era that basically most of those magazines would fold in the end, which is a shame. It's so weird that these magazines could exist from the 1950s to the 90s and then just basically fold. I think the New Musical Express is now online only and still going, but the other two have long since gone. The only comparable music review magazine was Pitchfork, which emerged around 96, something like that. And by the early 2000s was the preeminent music review source and a great era. You know, those 15 years were untouchable. Whether you agree with them or not, they were the most fun and often most accurate appraisal of everything about whatever was happening in music. And then they were bought out by the corporate overlords of Condé Nast, and a lot of people thought that was the end, that was the first end. Honestly, there was more of a focus from Pitchfork on ephemera like Beyonce and Drake. But crucially, their core audience was still being respected, which is their core audience was alternative music fans. It wasn't a pop Bible, it was an alternative music Bible that also respected good pop music. But they tended to elevate the coverage on someone like Beyonce, taking up the space of what would have gone to an alternative music artist. 4 clicks to represent their corporate overlords. But they still survived for many years. It was really, for me, the Fetch the Bolt Cutters / WAP being Song of the Year and Album of the Year. That era was when it seemed to get much worse. So there was a period where Pitchfork only gave out their coveted best new music for a new album. It seemed to black American rappers or white, not even white, but solo female R&B or pop artists. And then they even sort of went away from black American rappers to really all we care about is Sabrina Carpenter and Addison Rae and all of this garbage. And that ended up with them basically being bought by GQ magazine a couple of years back because they were just failing. Failing because they just ignored their core audience. They treated the person that likes the white indie guitar band like with contempt. They could find any number of ways to criticize those people and any number of ways to praise often very mediocre pop music. I have pop music in my albums of the year all the time. But I'm not going to say that something by, Addison Rae or Sabrina Carpenter is good, because it's not. It's rubbish. And now they're saying, that they're charging $5 a month. But for their worst content. If they'd have said this in, the year 2003, when they were at the apex of everything that was happening in trendy music, people would have reacted differently. But they're asking people now to pay $5 when it's really just female solo pop music, and good luck hearing about indie music, which they still cover, of course they do, and they still cover experimental music and so on. But the general consensus is they've moved away from caring about that and employed a lot more journalists that care about TikTok pop music, and have coincidentally got a core audience that is probably more in tune to that. But that core audience is getting their music from other spots. They're not dependent on Pitchfork. Pitchfork threw their weight behind an audience that doesn't really care that it exists. And the indie fans or the underground music fans were an afterthought. But what you can argue the merits of a pay-as-you-go model. I'm personally against it. Free forever. I'm sorry, but I am. And you don't need to be a corporate lapdog either. You could, they started as an independent organisation. And once they got into the hands of big business to make them more streamlined and profitable, they failed. They were doing all right when they were on their own. But the thing that's really pissing me off about this is they have a historic base of thousands of reviews going back to the end of the 90s, where, you know, a music journalist might have joined Pitchfork and provided them with 300 reviews over a 10-year period. All of that's now switched off, and I don't think that's right. Because if I was one of those journalists that had put up this massive bank of reviews that are still referenced by people, people often reference old Pitchfork reviews. To turn all of that off, it's like, did that person in 2005 sign up for that? No, of course they didn't. I don't think they should be allowed to turn off old reviews, because they're turning off all of them. You get 4 a month, and then they block the score and they block the content of the review, and I don't think that's fair. You know, whenever we see the corporates to make more money out of things come in, they often fold. We had free press in Australia, which has virtually vanished. So we had free newspapers. Where I live on the Northern Beaches, the Manly Daily, which I was a cover star once, you know, and that is one cover, it's unbelievable. That was the biggest distributed free press newspaper in Australia, 250,000 a daily, 250,000, and they got bought out by the Murdoch press and shut down within a few years because they weren't earning enough money. So it's difficult to see how, when everyone's been getting Pitchfork for free for 25, 30 years, how they will consider paying for it. But I don't think that, and particularly paying for what's now seen as somebody that has wandered a long way from their original mission statement of underground and alternative music. They could have perhaps reasserted their domain to be underground alternative music before going pay-as-you-go, but it's been very badly handled. It's difficult to see actually many people coming on board, and then that will be a case of Pitchfork's influence just waning even further and probably disappearing within a couple of years. But I think their music journalism from the year 2000 up until, say, 2020, I think that's an important historical body of work from the point of view of gauging the public sentiment and the reviewer sentiment of important shifts in music and albums and so on, and I don't think you should turn that off. I don't think that's on. But I do want to say Vale Pitchfork, I've read a million articles of Pitchfork. Maybe I should have paid for them, and I would have. But how can I pay for it now that it is, you know, a pop R&B Bible? It's not, it doesn't seem to care as much about the music that I like. So how am I going to pay for it now just to get access to old reviews? But you shouldn't turn off access. But Vale to Pitchfork for an astonishing run, the most important music review Bible of this century by miles. And I just want to be very clear, I won't be offering the subscription service on this show. I believe in free, apart from my OnlyFans.